We always set this side of time each and every week as we talk to the mayor of Kansas City. Quinton Lucas is here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Obviously, a lot to react to, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate the time as always. Let's start. Where do you want to start? Let's start nationally. We'll get to the local stuff as well. I know there's a lot to talk to. But nationally, the trends that we saw coming out of the election, what do you think the Democratic Party can learn from Tuesday night's results?
I think, look, and I put this in a few different places, you've got to find a way to actually talk to people and not in a way that vilifies them. Anytime somebody has tried to sell you something or if you try to talk to somebody on the street and say, hey, listen to my show, and if they were to say, Pete, I hear you just have on a bunch of radical Republicans, what would you say? You're like, no, a lot of other guests come on. There's a lot of reasonable conversation. That's the sort of thing that the Democratic Party needs to do more of. I mean, it's as simple as even the music you're using. If you watch the Donald Trump rally, you heard the song God Bless the USA, proud to be an American, right? Something we all know. And then you hear YMCA at the end. Part of that is because it's just so darn memorable and catchy in a way that everybody's like, all right, I've heard of that even if I don't like the guy. If you went to a Kamala Harris rally, you're hearing different songs, newer ones, from interesting artists, none of which have the same, I think, broad-based familiarity with the American people. That, I think, is just one indication of some of the things you were missing. Donald Trump was talking about things that hit people every day. I'm going to make the economy better. I'm going to make your city safer. As compared to Kamala Harris saying, actually, things are great. You just may not know, and we've done this, and this, and Congress screwed it up and all of that. And then all of a sudden you're stuck at saying, wait, what's going on? So I think it was a messaging failure. I think it was a connection failure. I think that it was a bit of a trusting too much of consulting classes and experts. And, and let me tell you one quick story. I don't want to ramble too long, but as you know, I was out in Las Vegas a few weekends ago, saw the Chiefs and the Raiders, and also did a campaign stop for vice presidential candidate Tim Walz. And I talked to some of the Walz people, and I said, hey, there's this Chiefs-Raiders game. Why doesn't Governor Walz just stop by the game and, wave at people and say hi, like President Trump was doing in Pittsburgh, and he had done at a few college football games. And they said, well, no, that's way too complicated, and we got to get a box, and we've got to do this, and this. And I said, well, it's like 68,000 people, and they'll probably put them on national TV just for a minute, and even if you get booed or whatever, you're there. Trump did those sorts of things. We saw him at McDonald's. We saw him in the garbage truck. We saw him at big football games. And frankly, he did things that all of us do. I've stopped at McDonald's. I go to football games, right? And I'm not a Trump voter. That's the sort of thing that's relatable as compared to playing Twitch, which I don't know exactly what that is, but apparently it's popular, with AOC during a football game. Those are the differences that I think come down to the tens of thousands of votes that swayed this election in key states.
And then talking about how AOC ran a mean pick six, which everybody knows is not an actual play as well on X. But you're right. I mean, listen, the male voter obviously swung heavily towards Trump, but the young male voter of all backgrounds, right? I mean, white, obviously, but also black and Latino men, especially younger ones, swayed towards Donald Trump. And that seems to be the biggest sticking point for the party right now. So as someone who is in that demographic, I think you're still under 40, black male, what is the answer to reach out to that constituency that is moving away from the party?
I think the biggest thing is you got to meet people where they are rather than telling them where they need to be. You heard all the scuttlebutt near the end of the election. I think we talked about it, too, of, former President Obama potentially telling black men where they should be. There was a lot of this kind of talk about, frankly, all the talk about demographics generally, and look, and I love being black, but I also love being an American and a Kansas City and a husband and my children who are biracial and all those sorts of things, right? They're, at a certain point, you got to say, look, I'm just going to be the best darn president for America. I'm just going to do this for the people. Part of why I've always enjoyed being mayor, believe it or not, and I know I say some progressive things and do progressive things, but generally my chat with everyone, frankly, whether they live in Kansas City or not, or no matter their background, is that people talk to me and say, yeah, new airport's cool. Or, yeah, I want to feel safer if I'm going out for a late night in Westport. What are you going to do about it? Or, yeah, I kind of like the fact that they're repaving roads. I'm not building, roads for black people or white people or doing things for, a demographic or spending a special time on one or the other. Because if you're doing your job right, if you do an exciting radio show, it doesn't matter what the race of the listener is. They're pretty darn entertained. I'll let you in on something that's kind of maybe breaking news for some, but part of why I like the show, Pete, I grew up listening to Don Imus. It was nationally syndicated even here in Kansas City. And my mother, who is obviously black, and me would sit there and we'd drive to school and I would listen and we'd kind of giggle at whatever guest is happening and on at that point. People have probably different political views. There's an old white guy in New York City doing a show with a bunch of guests, mainly from that area. But, right, it's called relatability. It's called Trump being on Joe Rogan. It's those sorts of things that get done that make a difference. And note, by the way, I haven't even talked substance yet. A lot of that is just people knowing if you are for them or not. And too many young men are saying, all right, I know one guy who's talking like me and doing things that I do. I know another side that's telling me what I should be. And I think people always go with what is most comfortable.
Well, Mayor Lucas is here on KCMO. That's the national side. Let's spend a few minutes here on the local side. I know that your preferred candidate in the prosecutor's race in Jackson County, Melissa Johnson, got herself a victory. I know that you're proud of that. Statewide, it looks like sports betting barely passed. The abortion amendment passed easily. Is there a surprise in Missouri or locally from Tuesday night for you?
I think it's not a surprise. It's something I know every day. And you've talked about perhaps before how I shouldn't run statewide, but I think there's a path for Democrats. Almost every statewide, I was right on a statewide ballot. Actually, I wasn't that far off back in the summer on Amendment 4 either. I think the voters of Missouri, by and large, actually are common sense, moderate people who say, you know what, we believe in freedom of choice and responsibility, personal responsibility for people. So if you want to gamble, that's up to you. That's your choice. It was a very close vote. I think part of that was because they screwed up some of the messaging on is there school funding or not. And a lot of people were held up on that. I think you saw that on the reproductive health, abortion rights question, where I know a lot of people will have different views, but most people said, you know what? We've lived in a country where for decades now individuals decide those things. Individuals keep deciding. You saw that on minimum wage and paid sick leave, where people kind of said, you know what? Hey, let's find a way to make sure workers are protected. And then up and down the ballot, they said no to every Democratic candidate.
Well, think about that. You're right. Think about that. There are people who voted for Trump, Josh Hawley, and then more progressively on the ballot things, and every Republican won by 15 points. That is a major branding problem then for the Democratic Party, is it not?
It is absolutely. To our initial 5 minutes of this chat, that is the problem. Issues, and yes, everybody's issues can be better. You try to pinpoint them and all of that. But let's, for example, look at even, to go back to national, go to Middle Eastern policy in Israel. There's not actually that much daylight between President Trump and President Biden on standing up for Israel. However, if you ask a normal person, they might say, well, I've seen these college campus battles. I'm seeing all those other things, and I see something very different for Democrats. There is a huge branding issue and concern for Democrats, and I think they need to find a way to authentically get beyond it. Let me tell you what's not authentic. Lucas Kuntz's campaign, where basically he ended up getting the same poll numbers that generic Democrat. We could have found Bob Miller off the street, and he would have done as well as Lucas Kuntz and saved everybody $15 to $20 million. The issue is you've got to be authentic. You got to actually be from here. And I think the challenge you saw, particularly in the U.S. Senate race, you had Kuntz potentially shooting somebody or shrapnel at the end. You have them playing this game of big banks and all of that. Missourians want to know how their lives will get better. Right? It's not too different from a mayoral race. And I think the Democratic Party brand broadly in Missouri, but truly throughout the country, screwed it up in this election. And hopefully they listen to those of us from Middle America and other places and say, how can we do better next time, rather than just resigning to the coast and saying that everybody is racist. I'll tell you this, Pete. Sometimes I get called different things. I'm just kind of like, wait, now I'm racist too, or I'm offensive for this, or I have people who message me about all these things wrong. I'm like, it's about winning. It's about winning a majority, not about just telling people who they should be.
Listen, I know you've got a busy 2.5 years to accomplish a lot of things in this town, but is maybe a DNC chair or some spot like that potentially something that you would be interested in doing?
I'll be honest with you. I think yes is actually how I'm going to respond to that. Not because I'm actively running for anything. I love being the mayor of Kansas City, but look, I grew up at a time that's different than this one, when Democrats, even if they were flawed men, had party leaders like a Bill Clinton. We had moderate Democratic senators. We had a Mel Carnahan here in Missouri. We had a very different type of person who, frankly, you could find a way to relate to everybody. I know many of your listeners may not like Bill Clinton, but nonetheless, it's a guy from Arkansas. It's a guy who went through struggle in life. It's a guy who eats like us, or at least used to, right? I mean, there are just a bunch of different things. He makes mistakes like all the rest of us do. And frankly, I think that's what some Democrats miss. A lot of people said Donald Trump is an imperfect person, and that is 100% right. Don't get me wrong. But everybody said, so am I. So is my brother. So is my cousin. So is whomever. I just want to make sure that, we can all do better here in the future. So, I absolutely adore being mayor of Kansas City. It looks like I'll get the chance to do that for the rest of my term, and that's a wonderful thing. But, no, I'll love to have whatever influence I can, because I do think it's that important. They should not run another election where we think that the voice of consultant class on whatever coast is going to be more important than actually finding competitive races here. Here's a problem, right? The fact that Missouri and Kansas and 2/3 of our states aren't even remotely competitive is a problem. Back to my Clinton example, he was campaigning in Missouri. We used to be a swing state, but Missouri, Ohio, Florida, so many states that are off the map now. That is a problem for Democrats nationally. You have to find a way back through it. And you know what? If they'll listen to me, I'll certainly make sure my voice is heard.
Yeah, and I think the party's got to look at even the blue states. I mean, New Jersey and New York swung 15 points towards Donald Trump.
That's exactly right. I mean, 51% out of New Jersey. I mean, to tell you, there's something up with the brand. And by the way, for those who don't know, you know better than me, New Jersey is a very diverse state. And so, again, this whole kind of the country's racist or hates women and all that sort of stuff. I mean, look, that can be the work of sociologists to determine. But if you can't get one of the most diverse states in the country above a 51%, that tells me there's something wrong with what you're pitching. And I hope people take that message to heart.
Well, Mayor Lucas, thank you, as always, for the time. Thank you for the analysis. And we will talk to you again next week and get back to the business in this town. We appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you, sir. Take care.
All right. There you go. Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.